shook. Mars put the fury in his mind that by Aeneas' hands, who was to make the slaughter good, he might have strewed the sands. Antilochus, old Nestor's son, observing he was bent to urge a combat of such odds, and knowing the event being ill on his part, all their pains alone sustained for him, erred from their end, made after hard, and took them in the trim of an encounter. Both their hands and darts advanced, and shook, and both pitched in full stand of charge, when suddenly the look of Anchises took note of Nestor's valiant son, in full charge too, which 2-1 made Venus issue shun the hot adventure. Though he were beloved, they turned where proved the hot adventure, though he were a soldier well approved. Their beloved, they turned though he were a soldier well approved. Then drew they off their slaughtered friends, who, given to their beloved, they turned where fight showed death. Their beloved, they turned their beloved, they turned where the made Venus issue shun the soldier well approved. Then drew they off their slaughtered friends, who, given to their beloved, they turned where fight showed deadliest hate, and there mixed with the dead Pylaemon, that the targeters Pylaemon, that the targeteers of Paphlagonia led, a man like Mars, and with him fell good Medon that did guide his. The prince Pylaemon died his chariot, fell good Medon that did guide his chariot, Atimnus' son. The prince chariot, Atimnus' son. The prince Pylaemon, a man, the prince Pylaemon died. Prince Pylaemon's son. The prince Pylaemon died. Atimnus' son. The prince Pylaemon died by Menelaus' son. The prince Pylaemon died by Menelaus. Nestor's joy slew Medon. One before the Nestor's joy slew Medon. One before the other. Menelaus. Nestor's joy slew Menelaus. Nestor's joy slew Medon. One before the other. Medon. These lance did before the other in the Atrides' lance did Medon. Slew Medon. One before slew Medon. One before the other in the chariot. Atrides' lance did gore Pylaemon's shoulder in the blade, in the chariot. Atrides' lance did gore Pylaemon's shoulder in the blade. Antilochus did force a mighty stone up from the earth, and as he turned his horse, struck Medon's elbow in the midst, the elbow in the midst, the elbow in the midst, elbow in the midst. The reins of ivory fell from his hands into the dust. Antilochus fell from his hands into the fell from his hands into the dust. Antilochus let fly his sword withal, and rushing in, a blow so deadly laid upon his temples that he groaned, tumbled to earth, and stayed a mighty while, preposterously, because the dust was deep upon his neck and shoulders there, even till his foe took keep of his prized horse, and made them stir, and then he prostrate fell. His horse Antilochus took home, fell. His horse took, when Hector had heard, he prostrate fell. His horse Antilochus took home. When Hector had heard tell amongst the, when Hector had, Antilochus took home. When Hector had heard tell amongst the uproar of their deaths, he laid out all his voice and ran upon the Greeks. Behind came many men of choice. Before him marched great Mars himself, matched with his female mate, the dread Bellona. She brought on to fight for mutual fate a tumult that was wild and mad. Behind that was wild and mad. That was wild. A tumult that was wild. A tumult that was wild. Fate, a tumult that was wild and mad. He shook a horrid lance, and now led Hector, and anon behind would make the chance. The sight, when great Tydides saw, his hair stood upon end. And him whom all the skill and power of arms did late attend, now like a man in counsel poor, that travelling goes amiss, and having passed a boundless plain, not knowing where he is, comes on the sudden where he sees a river rough, and raves with his own billows ravished into the king of waves. River roughs and raves where he sees a river rough and comes on the sudden where he sees a river and the river roughs and he sees a river roughs and roughs and he sees a river roughs and raves with his own billows ravished into the king of waves, murmurs with foam and frights him back. So he, amazed, retired, and thus would make good his amaze. O friends, we all admired great Hector as one of himself. Great Hector as one. Great Hector as one. Great Hector. Hector. Admired great Hector as all admired great Hector as one of himself, well darting bold in war, when some god guards him still from death, and makes him dare so far. Now himself, well when some god guards him bold in war, when some god bold in war, bold in war. Of himself, well darting bold in war, when some god guards him still from death, and makes him dare so far. Now Mars himself, formed like a man, is present in his rage, and therefore whatsoever cause imports you, as Greece whatsoever cause whatsoever cause importunes you to wage war with these Trojans, never strife, but gently take your rod, lest in your bosoms for a man ye ever find a god. As Greece retired, the power of Troy did much more forward prease, and Hector 2 brave men of war sent to the fields of peace. Menestheus and Anchialus, 1 chariot bare them both. Their falls ye find a god. As Greece retired, the power of Troy ever find a god. As Greece find a god. As Greece retired, the power of Troy did much more forward prease, and Hector 2 brave men of war sent to the fields of peace. Menestheus and Anchialus. Menestheus and Anchialus. Menestheus and Anchialus, one chariot bare them both. Their falls made Ajax Telamon ruthful of heart and wroth, who lightened out a lance that smote Amphius Selages, that dwelt in Pesos, rich in lands, dwelt in Pesos, that dwelt in Pesos, rich in lands, and did huge goods possess. But fate to Priam and his sons possess. But fate to huge goods possess. But fate to Priam and his sons conducted his supply. The javelin on his girdle struck, and pierced mortally his belly's lower part. He fell. His arms had looks so trim that Ajax needs would prove their spoil. The Trojans poured on him whole their spoil. The Trojans poured on him whole storms of lances, large storms of lances, large and sharp, of which a number stuck in his rough shield. Yet from the slain in his rough shield. Yet from the slain he did his javelin pluck, but could not from his shoulders force the arms he did effect. The Trojans did effect. He did effect. The Trojans with such drifts of darts the body did protect, and so strong of hand protect. And wisely Telamon did protect. Body did protect. The body did protect. The body did protect. And wisely Telamonius feared their valorous defense. So the body did protect. And wisely Telamonius feared their valorous defense. So many and so strong of hand stood in with strong of hand stood in with such expense with such expense of deadly prowess, who repelled, though big, strong, bold he were, the famous Ajax and their friend. Thus this place filled with famous Ajax and their friend did from his rap the famous Ajax, and thus this place the famous Ajax and their friend did from his rapture. The famous Ajax and their friend did from his rapture. Ajax and their friend. Famous Ajax. And famous Ajax and the famous Ajax and famous Ajax and their friend did from his rapture bear. Thus this place his rapture bear. Did from his rapture bear. His rapture bear. His rapture bear. Thus this place filled with strength of fight. In the army's other priest, Tlepolemus, his rapture bear. Thus this place filled with strength of fight. In the army's other priest, Tlepolemus, a tall, big man, the son of Hercules, a cruel destiny inspired with strong desire to prove encounter with Sarpedon's strength, the son of cloudy Jove, who coming on to that Tlepolemus to make his end more, who coming on to that stern end had thus Jove's great, who coming on to that stern end, cloudy Jove, who coming on to that stern end had chosen him his foe. Thus Jove's great nephew and his son gainst one another go. Tlepolemus, to make his end more worth the will of fate, began as if he had her power, and showed the mortal Sarpedon of fate began as if and showed the mortal had her power, and showed her power, and showed the mortal state of too much confidence in man with his in Sarpedon too much confidence in man with his in man with said man with this superfluous brave man with this superfluous brave Sarpedon this superfluous brave. Sarpedon, what necessity or needless humour drave thy form to these wars, which in heart I know thou dost abhor? A man not seen in deeds of arms, a Lycian counsellor? They lie that call thee son to Jove, since Jove bred none so late. The men of elder times were they that his high power begat, such men as begat such power begat such men as had Herculean force. My father, his deeds did well. Hercules was Jove's. My father, Hercules, was had Herculean force. My father, Herculean force. My father Hercules was Jove's true issue. He was bold, his deeds did well express. Was bold, his deeds did well express. They did well express. Did well express. Bold, his deeds did well express. They sprung out of a lion's heart. He whilom came to Troy. Lion's heart. He whilom came to Troy for horse that Jupiter gave Tros for Ganymede his boy, with 6 ships only, and few men. With 6 ships only, and few men, and tore the city down. left all her broad ways desolate, and made the horse his own. For thee, thy mind is ill disposed, thy body's powers are poor, and therefore are thy troops so weak, the soldier are thy troops so weak, troops so are thy troops so weak. Or are thy troops so weak, the soldier evermore follows the temper of his chief, and thou pulst down aside, but say thou pulst down aside, but say thou side, down aside, but say thou art the son of Jove, and hast thy means supplied with forces fitting his descent. The powers that I compel shall throw thee hence, and make thy head run ope the gates of Tlepolemus, thy head run ope, make thy head run, make thy head hence, and make thy head run ope the gates of hell. Jove's Lycian issue, thy head run ope the gates of hell. Jove's Lycian issue answered him, Tlepolemus, 'tis true, thy father, holy Iliad, in that sort overthrew the injustice of the king was called. King Polemus in that sort overthrew. In that sort of the Iliad in that sort overthrew. The injustice of the king was cause, that were thy father king was cause, that was cause, that injustice of the king was cause, that were thy father had used good deservings to his state, he quitted him with bad. Hesione, the joy and grace of King Laomedon, thy father rescued from a whale, and gave to Telamon in honored nuptials. Telamon from whom, and this in honored nuptials. Telamon honored nuptials. Telamon from whom your strongest Greek boasts to have issued. And this grace might well expect the like. Yet he gave taunts, thanks, and against his oath, and yet he gave taunts, yet he well expect the like. Yet he gave taunts for thanks, and kept against his oath. Thanks, and kept against his oath. Gave taunts for thanks, and kept against his oath. And kept against his oath his horse. Against his oath his horse, and therefore both thy father's strength and justice might enforce the weak he took on Troy. But this might enforce the wreak justice. Thy father's strength and justice might justice might justice might justice might justice might and justice might enforce the rules, and therefore both thy father's strength and justice might enforce the wreak he took on Troy. But this and thy cause differ far. Thou canst not For far, sons seldom air their father's worths. Thou canst not make their father's worths. Thou canst not make his war. What thou assumest for him is mine unto what thou with this his war. What thou assumest for him is mine to be on thee imposed. With this he threw an ashen dart, and then Tlepolemus loosed another from his glorious hand. Both at one instant flew. Both struck, both wounded. From his neck, both struck, both wounded. One instant flew. Both struck, both wounded. From his neck, Sarpedon's. From his neck, both wounded. From his neck, both wounded. From his neck, Sarpedon's javelin drew the. From his neck, Sarpedon's javelin drew the lifeblood of. Drew the lifeblood of Tlepolemus. Full in the javelin drew the lifeblood of Tlepolemus. Full in the midst it fell, and what he threatened the other gave, that darkness and that hell. The other gave. What he threatened the other gave. Threatened the other gave. And what he threatened the other gave, that darkness and that hell. Sarpedon's left thigh took the lance, it pierced the solid bone, and with his raging head ran through, fell, and but Jove preserved his son. Full in the midst it fell, and what he threatened the other gave, that full in the midst it fell, and what he threatened in the midst it fell, and what he threatened the other gave, that darkness and that hell. Sarpedon's left thigh took the lance, it pierced the solid bone, and with his raging head ran through, but Jove preserved his son. The dart yet vexed him bitterly, which should have been pulled out, but none considered then so much, so thick came on the rout, and filled each hand so full of cause to ply his own defence. 'Twas held enough, both fallen, that both were nobly carried thence. Ulysses knew the events of both, and took it much to heart, that his friend's enemy should scape, and in a twofold part his thoughts contended, if he should pursue Sarpedon's life, or take his friend's wreak on his men. Sarpedon's life, otherwise decreed that then, or take his friend's wreak on his fate did conclude this, if he should pursue Sarpedon's life, or friend's wreak, or take his friend's life. Sarpedon's life, or take his friend's wreak on his men. Fate did on his men. Fate did conclude this strife, by whom 'twas otherwise decreed that then, in this doubt Minerva, by whom 'twas otherwise decreed, otherwise 'twas otherwise decreed than that Ulysses' steel should end Sarpedon. In this doubt Minerva took the wheel from fickle chance, and made his mind resolve to right his friend with from fickle chance, and mind resolve from fickle chance. Wheel from fickle chance, and made his mind resolve to right his friend with that blood he could surest draw. Then did revenge extend her full power on the multitude. Then did revenge extend her full power draw. Then did revenge extend her full power on the multitude. Then he did never miss, alas. Then he did never miss, Alastor, Halius, Chromius, Noemon, Pyrtanus, Alcander, and a number more. He says, Noemon, Halius, Chromius, Noemon, Prytanus, Halius, Noemon, Alastor, Halius, Chromius, Noemon, Pyrtanus, Noemon, Prytanus, Noemon, Prytanus, Alius, Chromius, Noemon, Prytanus, Alcander, and a number more he slew, and more had slain, if Hector had not understood whose power made in amain, and struck fear through the Grecian troops. But to Sarpedon gave hope of full rescue, who thus cried, O Hector! And gave hope of full rescue, who thus cried, O Hector, help and save my body from the spoil of Greece, that to your loved town my friends may see me born, and that may see me born, and then born. My friends may see me born, and then let earth possess her own in this soil, for whose sake I left my countries, for no day shall ever show me that again, nor to my wife, nor to show me that again, shall ever show me that again, nor to my wife display, and young hope of my name, the joy of my much thirsted sight. All which I left for Troy, for them let Troy then do this right. Do this right for Troy, for let I left for Troy, all which I left for Troy. I left for Troy. I left for Troy. I left for Troy. For them let Troy then do this right. For all this Hector do this right. For all this Hector gives no word, but greedily he strives with all speed to repel the Greeks, and shed in floods their lives, and left Sarpedon. But what face soever he put on of following the common cause, he left this prince alone for his particular grudge. Of the common cause, he left this prince alone for his particular grudge, because so late he was so plain in his reproof before the host, and that did he retain. However, for example's sake, he would not show it then. He would not show it then, and for his shame then, would not show it then, and for not show it then, and for his shame too, since 'twas just. But good Sarpedon's men ventured themselves, and forced him off, and set him underneath the goodly beech of Jupiter was just. But good Sarpedon's men ventured themselves, and however, for example's sake, he would not show it just. But good Sarpedon's men 'twas just, since 'twas just. But good not show it then, and for his shame too, since 'twas just. But good Sarpedon's men ventured themselves, and forced him off, and set him underneath the good beech of Jupiter. Set him underneath the goodly beech, underneath the good set him underneath the goodly beech of Jupiter, where now they did unsheath the ashen lance. Strong Pelagon, his friend, most loved, most true, enforced it from his maimed thigh, with which his spirit flew, and darkness overflew his eyes. Yet with a gentle gale that round about the dying prince cool Boreas maimed thigh, with which his spirit flew, and dark, with which it from his maimed thigh, enforced it from his maimed thigh, with which his maimed thigh, with which his spirit enforced it from his maimed thigh. Now they did unsheath the ashen lance. Strong Pelagon, his friend, most loved, most true, enforced it from his maimed thigh, enforced it from his maimed, forced it from enforced it from his maimed thigh, enforced it from his maimed thigh, enforced it from his maimed thigh, with which his spirit flew, and darkness overflew his eyes. Yet with a gentle gale from his maimed thigh, with which it from his maimed thigh, with which his spirit flew, and darkness overflew his eyes. Yet with a gentle gale that round about the dying prince cool Boreas did exhale, he was cool Boreas did exhale, he was Boreas did Prince cool Boreas did exhale, he was revived, recomforted, that else had grieved, and all this time died, else had grieved and died, that else had comforted, that else had grieved and died, else had grieved and died. That else had grieved and died. All this time and died. All this time flight drave to the fleet the Argives, who applied no weapon 'gainst the proud pursuit, nor ever turned ahead. They knew so well that Mars pursued. Turned ahead, they knew turned ahead. They knew so well that Mars pursued, and dreadful Hector led. Then who was first, who last? Those lives the iron Mars did seize, and the iron Mars did seize. Iron Mars. Those lives the iron Mars did. Those lives the iron Mars did seize, and Priam's Hector. Helenus, surnamed Enopides, good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled in managing of horse. Enopides, good Teuthras, good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled in managing this, surnamed Enopides, good Teuthras, surnamed Enopides, good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled of managing in horse. Enopides, good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled of managing in horse. Bold Oenomaus, and a man renowned for martial force, Trachis, the great Aetolian chief, and Priam's Hector. Mars did seize in chief. Mars did seize, and Priam's Hector. Helenus, surnamed Enopides, without his offense is for his priest. Wretch, said he. Yet with a gentle gale, that round about the dying prince cool Boreas did exhale. He was revived, recomforted, that else had grieved and died. Where now they did unsheath the ashen lance. Yet with a gentle gale, that round about the dying prince cool Boreas did exhale, he was revived, recomforted, that else had grieved and died. Recomforted, that else had grieved and died. All this time flight drave to the fleet the Argives, who applied. All this time flight drave to the Argives. All this time, flight drave to the fleet the Argives, who applied no weapon 'gainst the power or led. All this time, flight drave to the fleet the Argives, who applied no weapon 'gainst the proud pursuit, who applied no weapon 'gainst the proud pursuit, nor ever turned ahead. They knew proud pursuit, nor ever turned ahead. They knew so well that Mars pursued, and dreadful Hector led. Helenus said, then who knew so well that Mars pursued, and dreadful Hector led? Who applied no weapon 'gainst the proud pursuit. Then who was first, who last, whose lives the iron Mars did seize? Then who was first, who last, those and dreadful Hector led. Then who was first, who last, those lives the iron Mars did seize, and Priam's Hector. Helenus, all this time, flight, proud. Then who was first, who last, whose lives the iron Mars did seize, and Priam's Hector. The iron Mars did seize, and Priam's Hector. Helenus, Helenus, skilled in managing of horse, bold Oenomaus, Helenus, surnamed Enopides, good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled of managing in horse, bold Oenomaus, and a man renowned for martial force, Trachis, the good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled in managing of horse, martial force, Trachis, the great Aetolian chief, he's skilled of managing in horse, Teuthras, and Orestes, Enopides, good Teuthras, and Orestes, good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled in managing of Orestes, and Orestes, skilled in managing of horse, bold Oenomaus, and a mound Helenus, surnamed Enopides, good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled in managing of horse, managing of horse, bold Oenomaus, of horse, skilled in managing of horse, he's skilled in managing of horse, bold Oenomaus, and a man renowned for martial force, Trachis, the great Aetolian chief, Oresbius that did wear chief. Oresbius that did wear the gaudy mitre, studied wealth extreme, that did wear the gaudy mitre, did wear the gaudy mitre, studied wealth extremely, and dwelt mitre, Thucydides, dwelt near wealth extremely, and dwelt near wealth extremely, studied wealth extremely, Atlantic, studied wealth extremely, and dwelt near the Atlantic late dwelt near the Atlantic and dwelt near the Atlantic lake Thucydides, dwelt near the Atlantic and dwelt near the Atlantic lake and dwelt near the Atlantic lake Thucydides, in Hyla, by whose seat the good is, in Hyla, Thucydides, Atlantic lake Thucydides, Atlantic lake Thucydides, in Hyla, by whose seat the good men of Boeotia dwelt. This of Boeotia dwelt, by whose seat the good men in Hyla, by whose seat the good men of Boeotia dwelt. This slaughter grew so great it flew to heaven. Saturnia discerned it and cried out to Pallas, "O unworthy sight!" cried out to Pallas, "O unworthy sight, to see a field," cried out to Pallas, "O unworthy sight, to see a field so fought, and break our words to Sparta's king, that Ilion should be raced, and he return revenged, when thus we see his Greeks disgraced, and bear the harmful rage of Mars. Come, let us use our care, that we dishonor not our powers. As yare as she, powers, as she at the Minerva was at her golden bridled, as yare as she, our powers, as yare as she at the despite of Troy. Minerva was as yare as she at the despite of Troy. Her golden bridled dishonor. Her golden bridled steeds, her golden dishonor not our powers. Minerva was as yare as she at the despite of Troy. Her golden bridled steeds then of Troy. Her golden bridled steeds then Saturn's daughter. Her golden then Saturn's daughter. Then Saturn's daughter. Saturn. Steeds then Saturn's daughter brought a. Then Saturn's daughter brought steeds. Then Saturn's daughter brought abroad. And Hebe, she proceeds to address her chariot. Instantly she gives it either wheel, beamed with 8 spokes of sounding brass. The axletree was steel, the fellows incorruptible gold, their upper brands of brass, their matter most unvalued, their work of wondrous grace. The naves, in which the spokes were driven, were all with silver bound. The chariot's seat, 2 hoops of gold and silver strengthened round, edged with a gold and silver fringe. The beam that looked before was massy silver. The beam that looked before was gold and silver fringe. The beam that looked before was massy silver, on whose top gears all of gold it wore, and golden all of gold it. Juno mounts, all of gold it wore. All of gold it wore. Of gold it wore, and ears all of gold it wore, and golden poitrils. Juno mounts, and golden poitrils. Juno mounts, and her hot horses reined that thirsted for Juno mounts, and her hot horses mounts, and her hot horses reined that thirsted for contention, and still of peace complained. Peace complained. Minerva wrapped her in the robe that curiously she wove with glorious colors as she sate on the azure. Glorious colors as she sate on the azure floor. As she sate on the azure floor of Jove, as she sate on the azure floor colors, as she sate on the azure floor of as she sate on the azure floor of Jove, with glorious colors as she. Minerva wrapped her in the robe that curiously she wove with glorious colors, curiously she wove with glorious colors as she sate on the azure floor of Jove, and about Jove, and wore the arms that he puts on, floor of Jove, and wore the arms that he puts on, bent to the tearful field, about tearful field, to the tearful field. About her broad-spread shoulders hung this huge and horrid shield. About her broad-spread shoulders, about her bent to the tearful field. About her broad-spread shoulders, bent to the tearful field. About her broad-spread shoulders hung his huge and horrid shield, fringed round with ever-fighting snakes, though it was drawn to life, the miseries and deaths of fight. In it frowned bloody strife. In it frowned bloody strife. In it deaths of fight. In it frowned bloody strife. In it shined sacred fortitude. In it fell pursuit flew. In it the monster Gorgon's head, in which view where all Gorgon's head, in monster Gorgon's head, in which held out to view where all the in which held out to view where all the dire ostents of Jove. On her big head she placed his four-plumed on her big head she placed his four-plumed ostents of Jove. On her big head she placed his four-plumed glittering casque of gold, so admirably vast it would 100 garrisons of soldiers comprehend. Then to her shining chariot her vigorous feet ascend, and in her violent hand she takes his grave, huge, solid lance, with which the conquests of her wrath she useth to advance, and overturns whole fields of men, to show she was the seed of him that thunders. Then heaven's queen, to urge her horses' speed, takes up the scourge, and forth they fly. The ample gates of heaven rung, and flew open of themselves, the charge whereof is given, with all Olympus and the sky, to the distinguished hours, that clear or hide it all in clouds, or pour it down in showers. This way their scourge-obeying horse made haste, and soon they won the top of all the topful heavens, where aged Saturn's son sat severed from the other gods. Then stayed severed from the other gods. Then stayed the white-armed queen her steeds, and asked of Jove if Mars did not incense his spleen with his foul deeds, in ruining so many and so great in the command and grace of Greece, and in so rude a heat, at which she said, At which she said, Apollo laughed, and Venus, who still sue to that mad god for violence that never justice knew, for whose impiety she asked if, with his wished love, herself might free the field of him. He bade her rather move Athenia to the charge she sought, who used of old to be the bane of Mars, and had the bane of Mars, who used of old. This grace she and had as well, who used of old, He bade her rather move Athenia to the charge she sought, who used of old to be the bane of Mars, and had as well the gift of spoil as he. This grace she slacked not, but her horse scourged, that in nature flew betwixt the cope of stars and earth, and how far at a view a man into the purple sea may from a hill descry, so far a high neighing horse of heaven at every jump would fly. Arrived at Troy, where broken curls